Hey everyone, back with another episode of With Love Solé. And I wanted to invite a conversation in with you guys that I think is going to be really important going forward. And I can see this playing out in a really real way on the planet right now in various capacities. And I think once you make this topic right within yourself, it's a lot easier to kind of facilitate the merger that's happening in what I'm about to describe. And the merger is the integration between the 3D reality and the 5D reality. A lot of you who come on here and listen to me talk and are in this kind of metaphysical world, if you will, and you're cultivating your spiritual gifts and you've sort of found the magical truths that are embedded in the unseen that live in the 5D reality. You know that there's so much more than this 3D reality. There's like, I mean, anybody who's like even had a taste of the divine and has any connection to sort of the unseen energetic realms or the energetic body or your own intuition, you understand that there's more happening here than just this physical 3D world. And the question then is how do we bring that in a way that maintains the integrity of the 3D reality, because we also do absolutely in this life form exist in a 3D world, and keep the sanctity and the integrity of the 5D reality, which is more fluid and quantum, and it's taste, see, feel, touch, smell it. It's the spiritual senses that kind of add that in, and there's a level of almost like divine faith in your own instructionality and how to carry that forward and to invite that into the space, right? And so the question is then, how do we do that? And how do we do that in a real way and in a way that's sustainable and also still somewhat objective? Because the thing about the 3D reality is like, we'll say this is a microphone, and everybody's like, yep, that is a microphone. Indeed, it's a tangible thing. We can all see it and we can decide that is the microphone. That's what that's going to be. We're going to all call it the microphone. But in the 5D reality, it's more quantum, right? So even the struggle of quantum physics is to try to describe and study the behavior of the quantum reality, because it's less linear, it's less practical, it's less like tangible, and it's harder to delineate rules and regulations in that space because there's a lot of kind of like, what the heck is happening here, And so I might call this thing intuition and somebody else might call it something else, and we have different experiences. So here I am trying to describe experientially something that you can only really understand experientially. And if someone does have the understanding experientially of that thing, then we can decide what to call it. But if somebody doesn't have the experience of that thing, it's like trying to, teach someone a language that they don't even speak. So there's a lot of levels to the integration of the 5D into the 3D, but I sincerely believe that's what a lot of us are here to do. And when I talk about the new paradigm, to me, it's all about ushering in the 5D and weaving it into the structures and foundation that is already laid in the 3D reality. But we're not bypassing any longer there being a higher truth, a higher intelligence, higher consciousness. And of course, as many of us know, the pathway to higher consciousness, and very much so into the 5D, is through the self, because it is an experiential thing. It's a collapsing of the paradigm within yourself that lives only in the 3D or only in the ego, and the reopening and remembering of the spirit and the energetic selves. So there's a lot of levels and layers to this, and that's why it makes it kind of wonky and crazy, because we all are still kind of speaking our own language around it, because we also sort of so far only know it experientially. And that's why many of you are drawn to me, because I speak to the experiential and I give language to things that haven't really landed yet fully in sort of mainstream understanding, if you will. And I think we're all kind of doing that. So I'm giving you language and you guys give me language, and we kind of are better understanding this integration that's happening by way of one another. So the question is then, how do we do that in real time, right? And an example that is kind of the stereotypic example is, those say in the spiritual communities, if you've ever spent any time in kind of your spiritual community or any spiritual community, frankly, there's a lot of kind of bypassy energy. And if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. It's like they are so 5D that it's like there's the bypassing of there also being a 3D reality, or that 5D is the only truth, and they kind of eye roll at the 3D reality, and you can just bypass that and stay up here, right? An example of that is oneness, right? The spiritual people love to say that the ultimate truth is oneness, that, on an energetic and spiritual level, we are all interconnected, and there's no kind of true delineation delineation between where I end and you begin. And in the 5D reality, that is true. I think even measurably so by way of quantum physics and what have you. And I'm very much my own person, and I'm this person, and you need to stand 6 feet from me when you talk to me. You know what I mean? Like boundaries are a buzzword for a reason because I need to delineate myself in the 3D reality. Because if I don't, I'm going to just be walked over, and I will not survive the 3D reality if I don't have some form of boundary to delineate where I end and you begin, right? So both are true. It is totally true that we, on a fundamental quantum level, we are all oneness, 100%. And in the 3D reality, there's me and there's you, and we can share a lot of truths and we could find, we could close our eyes and like drop into that beautiful quantum connection and also understand that I have boundaries and know that, I'm not a cuddle puddle type of person personally. Um, and I laugh at that and I say that, but that like perfectly kind of encapsulates what I'm describing here in terms of there being this kind of wonky integration, right? Because how do we hold the truth that we are fundamentally and ultimately all completely integrated in one another energetically, and I'm still in me and I'm still going to hold lines to you because I need to do that to keep the integrity of my energetic body and my presence. And it's awkward, right? And so some go as far as just kind of being super bypassy about things, and that can get kind of gaslighty and funky and weird. And then some just live only in the human reality, and so which is kind of, mostly ego driven if we're being real. Um, and so those of us who kind of straddle the worlds and understand them, it poses an interesting way of existing in the world, frankly, even in your own personal experience. Because, for example, if you kind of maintain the higher consciousness perspective that all things happen for a reason and everybody's kind of on their spiritual path and the experiences that they're experiencing are in some way, shape, or form like related to their spiritual mandate and their divine assignment, what they're here to do specifically, even the tragedy and chaos and all of the war and all of that that's happening on the planet. While that's true, does that mean, you just stay in that what I want to call a bypass and not, you don't need to lend any empathy or do anything about it because they're going through what they need to go through because that's what they've been assigned to do and contracted to do in this incarnation. And a lot of people feel that way. And again, I'm not knocking that frame. But the question is, how and when do we kind of intervene then in the 3D reality? How do we help? What is helpful if we know that, most people are experiencing things that are truly and fundamentally for the evolution of their own soul? Is there any intervention? Is there any help? Can we facilitate ease in the process in some way? And where do we lend ourselves to the paths of others? Right. So there's like all these question marks in having a sort of a higher understanding and also being still intimately connected to the humanity of things. And if you know what I'm talking about, you may even feel this in your own life, like I know for me, it's like when I lost my mom, it was kind of like the ultimate, like, bamboozling of like, how do I stay in the 5D reality and the understanding and the knowing and the feeling and the experience of her everywhere, especially when she first transitioned. It was like I felt her everywhere. It was almost like I was like, Mom, I'm gonna be all right. You can, I felt like her almost kind of coddling me, honestly, in the spiritual. And in my humanity, it was the highest tragedy I've ever experienced and will probably be that because of who she was to me and what that death meant to me and on my path. And so I was like, anybody who's been in grief, and if you have sort of a spiritual understanding of loss and death, you straddle the world hugely in grief because your humanity is like, you've just gone there, a bomb has just gone off in your world. You've lost a part of yourself that you don't know how to operate without. And you're like trying to navigate this world again, and you're like just trying to keep it together in your humanness. And on the 5D plane and in the spiritual reality, it's like you've gained an angel and you can feel their presence and there's guidance and directions, and you can feel when they present themselves in a cardinal or a butterfly, and it's like the absolute most blissful, incredible, magical thing ever. And it's both, and I think that that's the true nature of being human, is that it's both. It is both the ultimate tragedy of being human and the ultimate bliss of being something infinitely more than that. And so I think those of us who are kind of deep on our spiritual path and who are working through the awakening codes are trying to find a way to bring both together and make it real and still learn and let the humanity of things fine tune you into more of yourself and to break apart your internal paradigm that keeps you small or kind of tethered to your human frame, and also, stay connected to your own spirit and the magnitude of who you are and who we really are and who we really have the capacity to be, and how do we keep opening doors for more spiritual servitude and spiritual truth and spiritual integrity to exist in the 3D realm, especially a 3D realm ran by the Matrix, right? That adds a whole nother layer of interesting stuff, we'll say. So I want to bring this forward because if you've ever grappled with this, or, it's like, well, I know this truth is true, but this truth is also true, and there's two worlds happening simultaneously. So how do I and where do I fit into the kind of merger of those two worlds? And I think each of us are going to just continue to live out that sort of experientially and in our own way of doing that, which is why we all have our own character that we play. I mean, this ultimately is a character, and this is who we've been here, put on this planet to play out this character in the divine scheme of things. And we have a certain energetic and a certain truth and a certain way of seeing things that's going to offer a new, interesting, different type of perspective, different type of energy, different type of potentiality to the collective. And when you dive into your own inner frame around that, you're able to kind of parse out what doesn't feel true to you in that way and bring online the things that do. So you're just kind of constantly expanding yourself as both a human being and something infinitely larger than that. And we're doing that in this kind of awkward human reality where money is God, and like we're ran by shadow figure people, and a lot of questions of like why things actually happen. And seems like we're all kind of constantly being psyoped and bamboozled. So there's like so much happening, that how do we bring in this like very sacred, pure, spiritual, divine truth into this world that like would just like slap it across the face and say it's woo woo and weird because you don't make any money? And on the one hand, I actually look forward to the advancement of AI, in that I think it's going to actually offer a new frame for people to find purpose in things beyond just what you do for a living or how much money you make. Because if, say, a large percentage, a large majority of the jobs are going to be taken by AI, what are people going to do? So many people, obviously make their entire income and are, completely dependent on their job to like for a livelihood. I mean, we all need to make money. And so if you're not making money, and also you're not defined by what do you do for work, and that's what you do, and that's how you define yourself, and that's what you feel good about, and that's where you find purpose each and every day, then you're both going to have to either find a new way of making money or create a new currency, or B, find a new way of defining yourself and finding a new way of feeling purpose. And to me, the ultimate purpose has always come from my own spiritual depths and knowing the ways that I have cleansed and cleaned and gone through and purified my spirit to be who I am and to bring what I bring. And that's what I stand on. That's where my purpose comes from more so than anything else. And then I feel like it just shines through, and that's why I can communicate it easily and feel good about what I offer to the world, because I feel like I'm continuously so cleaning the vessel for me to be a clearer channel for whatever I'm here to bring to come through. So maybe there will be this opportunity in the very near future, as like the job market changes and the relationship to money in general changes, that people who have found themselves in a spiritual way and know themselves spiritually and energetically can offer a different frame for people, and a different kind of outlet to find purpose in and to feel like you're here to do something that you're here to do. And that's spiritual gifts, that's divine purpose, that's a divine mandate, that's your divine assignment, right? It's like all of these kind of 5D ideologies that so far we've kind of like kept in the closet because they don't really have language in the 3D yet. And so now there's going to be this opportunity for us to take them out of the closet, bring them out of the closet, and bring them into real time and help and steer and help and guide other people into finding their divine mandate and divine purpose and divine assignment. So I'm inviting us here take your metaphysical understanding and your higher consciousness out of the closet and invite it into your world in a realer way. And I think a lot of us don't do that because still in the sort of mainstream consciousness, there's still not a full understanding of it. So if you're talking about the quantum reality, someone might think that's weird. They'd rather talk about spoons. And if you're talking about manifesting or mastering your reality, someone's going to think that's weird. They'd rather talk about the Real Housewives. And letting there be this kind of awkward transition phase into what comes next, and let yourself be an usherer of what comes next, and widely and totally misunderstood in a reality that still doesn't have context for that yet. Because who's going to bring it if not us? And who, carries forward new vision, new potential, new possibility, if not the visionaries of that dimension and that timeline? And I think the visionaries of this timeline are very much those of us who have walked our own spiritual path. And we can speak to it, we can normalize the things, we can make it mind-blowing and tragic equally, we can make it 5D and 3D equally, and we have integrated it within ourselves so that we can spit the language to anybody in mostly their language, and whether they fully understand it in this moment or not means that we've just planted the seeds. So, whatever this means to you, I'm giving you that permission, and I'm inviting us to go a little harder in the integration season of this, because I think it's really important that we do. I think it's important that we start to not put the 5D on this pedestal or somewhere else, and or use it as something that we bypass, or to gaslight the 3D reality, and that we kind of slowly work on finding this harmonious balance between the two, where we are highly, conscious beings in a 3D reality, and that we are both spirit form and human form equally, and that we meet our human needs and spirit needs equally, and that we prioritize both. And I think it's possible. It's always funny to me that there's not really a term for the 4D. I don't know why, but maybe this is what it's coming forward here, is like, let's invite each other and meet in the 4D, where the worlds meet and collide. They're still kind of colliding, but right now, because the world is still shifting, and it's still this kind of uncomfortable transition phase from like adolescent spiritual to, the slightly more advanced and to, higher consciousness beings. So let's activate the 4D. Let's bring and meet the worlds there, and let us be the ones who carry in a new reality, even if it's a little uncomfortable at first, because it's necessary and it's happening no matter what. And we don't need to like hide the magic and hide the quantum and hide the metaphysical and try to tuck that into a small box when it's literally like 99% of our reality. It's just that not that we can see, taste, touch, or feel it. So, most people aren't like actively dancing in the quantum, but some of us are. And it's great. And, when you actively dance in the quantum, you paint the masterpiece of your reality in a much different way than when you don't. And you live on your destiny timeline rather than the fate timeline that's always dragging you through your life lessons. The destiny timeline is the one where you're actively working for them and choosing them, and finding the thing that's going to give you the next level of yourself. So that's what I got. I want to leave that there and see how it feels, and let us kind of chew on that and see how it feels to each one of us individually, because I think that we all are going to be carrying in this new way of existing in our own way, and that's very specific and important and necessary. So ask yourself what that means to you, and where could you be a little bit more out of the closet in your metaphysical understanding of things, and in as a higher consciousness being, and let it be a little uncomfortable, but also hold it down. You've done the work. And that's the number one thing that you can always sit back on, is like, I'm confident because I've done the work, and I know this isn't just me like bypassing, it's actually me ushering in a new paradigm and a new reality that the world really needs. So that's what I'm going to leave it at today. Always a reminder, Soulful Remedies, we're still running and doing good. It's been really fun for me to kind of bring this into the world. We are running a sale for another couple of days through the end of the month. So if you want to grab something for yourself, you'll see the code when you first click on the website, soulfulremedies.shop. Otherwise, thank y'all. I love y'all. I'll see you next week.